I know I'm not streaming in a long time, but I'm getting ready to move, staying in Mississippi, but moving towns, moving from Hattiesburg, Mississippi to Brandon, Mississippi. So I've been very, very busy with that, getting ready to get the house on the market, and it's just been a trip. So I'm gonna get this stream posted to the Telegram group if anybody, so people know that I'm streaming. It was a very unexpected stream, but I just watched Ronaldo host stream, and apparently YouTube is going after Chris Wyatt again, and Chris Wyatt is apparently Chris Wyatt is cannot stream for 2 weeks, and this is a sad situation. Chris Wyatt is a very good guy. He is not narrow-minded at all. He's very open-minded about topics and does not interrupt guests. He does not get fired up with the guests, and I firmly believe that what they're doing, with all due respect to YouTube, what I really think that they're doing to Chris Wyatt is just outright disgraceful. So I'm going to go ahead and get this posted to various Telegram groups, if anybody, so people will know that I'm streaming. But how are you guys doing out here? I hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys had a really good Sunday. Most of my viewers are South African, but I'm going to talk about what is going on mostly in the U.S., but I'm going to cover various topics. Right now, the biggest thing in the United States is the anti-Asian hate crime situation. And I've discussed the Atlanta shooting in various videos before. And various videos, the Atlanta shooting was a sad tragedy, but it was not racism. What the guy was a 21-year-old, the shooter was a 21-year-old Caucasian male named Robert Long. Well, Robert Long was a crazy whack job sex addict. He admitted he was a sex addict, and he told the police, and the Atlanta police is a predominantly African-American organization. Well, the Atlanta police didn't believe it was racism either. The Atlanta police had said, based on his testimony, that they did not think it was racism, that the guy was a sex addict, and Robert Long's testimony was he wanted to kill the sources of his addiction, which that does not excuse what he did. This guy committed acts of murder, and he needs to get the chair. I firmly believe. But it was not racism. Now, there was an act of hate crime that did happen shortly thereafter in San Francisco's Chinatown. And in San Francisco's Chinatown, fortunately, the police arrested the perpetrator, but the perpetrator was a Caucasian male. And he has had several instances where he has shoved elderly Asian people to the ground and blaming the coronavirus on every single Asian on the planet, which is wrong because most Chinese Americans in this country are vehemently anti-communist. And that's why they come to America in the first place, most of them, is to escape communism. And, well, this one guy had shoved this 71-year-old Chinese lady to the ground. Well, the lady got up and fought back, and she had a cane with her, and she, rightfully so, defended herself and beat the crap out of him with that cane. And the police, when they came to the scene, they had to hold her back, and several bystanders had to hold her back because of that situation. And she was unjustly attacked. It was an unprovoked attack, and she says everybody needs to feel safe in this country, which is true. That's why the San Francisco police has increased patrols in the predominantly Asian areas, and they're also encouraging people, particularly Asian women, to not be alone, to have somebody with you at all times, and to try to be in groups. And I firmly believe that that is the right thing to do. Right now. So these anti-Asian hate crimes have got to stop. Now, here's the thing where the media is twisting things, okay? In Texas, this guy from Myanmar was with his 2 children, okay? Formerly known as Burma, but it's now called Myanmar. Well, it was in Midland, Texas, and he was stabbed. This man was stabbed, and his kids were stabbed too. I believe the kids died, and I believe the man survived. But the perpetrator was a Hispanic male named Jose Gomez, and Jose Gomez admitted this. That's why the FBI charged him with a hate crime. He admitted that he stabbed them because they were Asian, and he blamed the coronavirus on them. Never mind, these people were from Myanmar, not China. But the media did report the stabbings, but most sources didn't list who the perpetrator was. So typically when an anti-Asian hate crime is reported, but they're not showing the perpetrator, or they're not naming the perpetrator, typically the offender is an African-American male or a Hispanic male. Now, if they list the perpetrator, obviously it typically shows a white male. And I have Korean immigrant friends in New Jersey, and some of them have been verbally harassed I don't think they've been physically assaulted, but I think they've had friends who've been physically assaulted or threatened. But typically the perpetrator, when they go to New York City, because they're kind of like where they are is right on the border with New York City. If they go to New York City, or if they go into town, typically the perpetrators that they have personally experienced have been African American males. So typically that is what's happened. Okay, so gonna talk about. Hang on, I'm gonna get this posted to another Telegram group. So just hang on one second. Okay, another thing that is going on. I'm going to talk about the Meghan Markle situation, and this is just sad. And I think Meghan Markle is an entitled, whiny, spoiled brat. And that is my humble opinion. Okay? She married into the British royal family. And there was a former royal wife that had married into the British royal family. Vice News did a good segment on it. Vice News is a liberal organization, but I enjoy their reporting, and I actually enjoy parts of their news. And that seemed like it was a little slanted to pro Meghan Markle, but not badly. But what they did admit in that interview is that Meghan Markle was warned by friends not to marry into the British royal family. And she did it anyway. You can say she did it for love. She might love Prince Harry. No, I believe love's colorblind. So, maybe so. But here is the thing with that. Here's the thing with that, okay? The thing with that is, okay, they warned her. They said the British tabloids are going to be brutal to any royal wife and any royal family member. So you need to be prepared for the brutality of the British tabloids. Well, Meghan Markle kind of ignored their advice. She heeded their advice, and she went on to marry Prince Harry anyway. Now, if you saw footage of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's wedding, the crowd was ecstatic. They were waving flags of British Union Jack flags. They're also waving American flags. The general public, who was predominantly Caucasian, seemed happy that a person of color was going into the British royal family. Well, okay, but Nigel Farage, who is a conservative pro-Brexit UK politician, had told Fox News, Nigel Farage says that the British press was not initially after Meghan Markle and wasn't trying to be out to get Meghan Markle at first. Where things changed for both her and Prince Harry is when her and Prince Harry would fly around the world in Gulfstream private jets, lecturing the world about climate change, but flying around in a Gulfstream private jet. Okay, here's the thing. I'm not saying I'm a pro-environmentalist or I'm anti-environmentalist, but I don't care how much money I would have. I cannot afford a private jet. But even if I could afford a private Gulfstream jet or Gulfstream private jet, I would not get one. Those things apparently, I'm saying apparently, release about 3 to 4 times of gas emissions into the ozone layer than does a regular commercial airline jet. They were going around flying in a private jet that's very pollutive, lecturing people about climate change. And that really ticked a lot of the British press and a lot of the average citizens of the UK off, apparently, according to Nigel Farage. Well, I firmly believe that Nigel Farage was correct in that situation. Nigel Farage had talked about that was going on. Well, okay. So that happened, okay? And then also a position of a royal family member, and this is protocol, and this is common protocol. I mean, almost every citizen in the UK and the United States knows this. Britain is a constitutional monarchy. The royal family is there, but they're mostly figureheads. They have limited political power. The power lies with the Prime Minister, and it lies with Parliament. Well, so the royal family has to be politically neutral. Okay, and they have to have a relationship with any prime minister that the UK has and any president the United States has, because the US and the UK have what you call a special relationship. Well, even as anti-UK as Barack Obama was, the British royal family had a relationship with President Obama because that was royal family protocol to do that. Well, Meghan Markle wouldn't follow protocol, and this is where, I believe that, we're all God's children. In a lot of ways, we're all one race. We all have similarities. The royal family and Meghan Markle had a lot of similarities in personality. And sometimes when you have too similar of personality traits, you conflict. Well, just like the royal family, apparently Queen Elizabeth II is as a stickler when it comes to traditions and when it comes to which fork you got to eat certain foods with, how you have to dress going out in public, how you walk towards the throne, how you shake hands with a delegate of a different country. And there's several protocols with that. And Queen Elizabeth II apparently is not very flexible in those areas. But she's the head of the royal family, so it's protocol. Well, Meghan Markle didn't like a lot of the protocols, and Meghan Markle went through about 3 or 4 secretaries in the span of about a year. I mean, the latest secretary she had lasted 2 years, but she would average, at first she averaged a secretary about once every 3 months because they said she was just too difficult to work with. And Meghan Markle didn't like having to walk slightly behind Prince Harry when they went out in public or when they were at official formal gatherings. But that's royal family protocol. She would walk in front of Prince Harry, which was anti-protocol. So that went on as well. And so apparently it looks like Queen Elizabeth II is very rigid, and Meghan Markle was very rigid, and personalities probably conflicted there. Also, but I don't believe it's racism, because Queen Elizabeth II had told the press, and she said as soon as she saw that interview and Meghan Markle thought she experienced racism, I'm putting racism in quotes because I really didn't think it was racism, but Queen Elizabeth II didn't like that somebody had been in the royal family, been concerned about what skin color Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's baby would be. So Queen Elizabeth has ordered an investigation into this, but the reason the investigation has not turned up anything, it's not because the royal family's dragging their feet, it's because Prince Harry and Meghan Markle didn't name the royal family member that said that, number one. But then also number two, I personally didn't think it was racism, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, Clarence Adams was an African-American soldier, U.S. soldier from Memphis, Tennessee, during the 1940s and the 1950s when systemic racism was rampant. Well, and that is why when the Chinese captured him, he, as a POW, he decided to stay in China after the war. He married a Chinese woman, and they had 2 kids together. When the first baby was born, a lot of their neighbors were talking about what skin color they thought the baby was going to be. One of the neighbors thought the baby may have been striped. The other thought the baby may have been polka dotted, because it just wasn't a common situation at the time for African Americans and Chinese nationals to marry. They may have been the first marriage in mainland China between an African American male and a Chinese national. Well, neither Clarence Adams nor his wife got offended with those questions or with the curiosity. I mean, you could argue that may have been an ignorant thing for the guy to do, but I don't think it was a racist or malicious thing for the guy to do. That's what I personally think. So, how are you guys doing? If you guys have any comments or anything to say, please go ahead and comment. Nice seeing all you guys. I know it's late night in South Africa, and normally, like I said, I do talk about Africa, but this is kind of what's going on in the United States. But now in Mississippi, Black Asian tensions are almost non-existent, and honestly, white Asian tensions are almost non-existent. The handful of Asians we have in Mississippi, they can marry Caucasians and have children, and everybody's okay with it, and they can marry African Americans and have children, and everybody's okay with it. It's not right, but what really typically happens in Mississippi is if there's blacks and whites hanging out together or marrying and having kids together, then a lot of people particularly lose their mind. I think it's stupid. I think it's ignorant to do something like that, but that is what's going on. So typically, like I said, Black-Asian tension is not a problem in Mississippi. Typically, when we hear about Black-Asian tension over here, we hear about it in the news, and it's usually going on in New York or California or New Jersey, and it's not something we regularly experience over here, just like we don't regularly experience white Asian tension either. So it's not, prime example, there's this guy named, that the Japanese Americans, or Americans of Japanese ancestry that fought in World War II for the United States, a lot of them did their basic training down here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at Camp Shelby. And the Japanese Americans were pretty much allowed to go into the white areas of town and into the black areas of town. They could go to the white USO halls and hang out with the white soldiers, and they could go to the black US halls and hang out with the black soldiers. And there was this guy named Herbert Sasaki who was from California, and he experienced some racism in Mississippi, but compared to the racism he experienced on the Pacific coast in California, after Pearl Harbor was hit, it was very, very mild in comparison. And Herbert Sasaki married a white Mississippian and made Mississippi his home. Now, there was a law against white Mississippians marrying Asians or any interracial relationship at that time. But he was able to go to Louisiana and get married, according to him and his wife. And when they came back, they didn't experience any flack or any racism from their neighbors. Their neighbors were very congratulatory towards them, and their neighbors were very welcoming towards them. And that's one of many reasons why he decided to make Mississippi his home after the Second World War. That's what Herbert Sasaki said himself. Now those are the ones from the Pacific coast. Now the ones from Hawaii were a lot different. The Japanese Americans from Hawaii were different. Hawaii, even at the time when it was a U.S. territory, was a predominantly Japanese American area. And so when many of them left Hawaii to come to Mississippi for basic training, that was the first time any of them had experienced any sort of racism whatsoever, even though it was mild. And the ones from the West Coast would typically calm them down and say, compared to the West Coast, Mississippi is minor in a lot of this. So that's the story there. Actually, the reason that I talk about this is because the most famous and most decorated infantry unit in World War II was the Japanese American Regiment, the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. And they did not fight Japan in the Pacific Theater. They went over to Europe and fought Nazi Germany. Well, there were 7 Congressional Medals of Honor that were awarded to those soldiers. They were a very, very highly decorated unit. And actually, Senator Daniel Inouye, after the war, he lost one of his arms in the war, but despite being one-armed, he went on to become a U.S. Senator in Hawaii. That's where he's from. And Daniel Inouye had been a senator for 30 or 40 years. He passed away about 8 or 10 years ago. And he did his basic training at Camp Shelby in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But there were also ones that did go over to the Pacific Theater to fight against Japan. They were called the MIS, the Military Intelligence Service. And our friend Chris White, he was in military intelligence, so he may know about these guys in history. But they were Japanese. Their parents were born in Japan typically, but they were born in America. And they were linguists because they were proficient in the Japanese language, and they interrogated a lot of Japanese prisoners of war. They translated a lot of key Japanese documents. And Filipino guerrillas fighters captured some key Japanese documents, and they turned them over to the United States military. Well, the U.S. military sent them to the Japanese American linguists. They translated them, and this was before the Battle of Leyte Gulf. That was actually my maternal grandfather's first battle in World War II. He was with the United States Navy, and it was the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Well, the U.S. already knew all their plans and knew what was going on, and so they won that battle decisively. And so, largely, if it wasn't for those Japanese American linguists, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys on YouTube. Studies show the U.S. probably would have won the war without them, but the war would have lasted 2 more years. Would have ended in 1947 instead of 1945, number one. And there would also have been several thousand more American casualties if it was not for those Japanese American linguists in military intelligence service. So that is a story that I've always been wanting to share as well. Now, okay, all right, we talked about that. We discussed that. All right, what I'm going to discuss also as well now is the whole. I was checking this something right here. Okay, I was going to talk the Meghan Markle. Get back on Meghan Markle for a minute. The Meghan Markle and Prince Harry situation. Somebody started a GoFundMe page for them because they're living in a $16.5 million estate in California, and apparently they can't make the payments on this estate. But keep in mind, Prince Harry's crying, saying, all I have is my mother's inheritance. Your mother's inheritance, Prince Harry, that he inherited from his mom, Princess Diana, is about $15 or $16 million. If you are on the interest, that is about $640,000 a year. Now, I'm not sure of Meghan Markle's net worth, but she ain't broke. But the GoFundMe page, which is a funny story, had to close due to lack of interest. Only $110 was raised. Due to lack of interest and lack of capital, the GoFundMe page had to shut down. And rightfully so. It was just a comical situation. I mean, come on. Okay, now, Michelle Obama, because she knew the royal family, she's hoping that she said in an interview that she hopes that Meghan Markle and the royal family can reunite, can make do and everything there. But now, here's the thing. She said it's about the group. It ain't always about you. And Michelle Obama may be genuine with that. I don't know. I don't know former First Lady Michelle Obama. And I hope she is. I really do. But here's the thing. The Obamas started getting deals with Netflix and several other deals. And then right around the same time, so did Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And if you know anything about President Obama, Obama hated the UK with a passion. He removed the bust of Winston Churchill from his Oval Office. And, he did. And Obama is not silent about this. His grandfather, Onyango Obama, was a domestic servant to the British when the British had controlled Kenya. Well, Obama's grandfather was not a participant in the Mau Mau Rebellion, but the British arrested him and thought that he was, and the British put him in prison. Well, I understand that. I understand Obama's personal feelings with that, but the Mau Mau rebels were guerrilla fighters, so a lot of times the British didn't know who the enemy was, number one. Number two, the British were brutal in that war, but so are the Mau Maus. The Mau Maus had terrorized and brutally murdered any village that didn't choose to participate in the Mau Mau Rebellion. The Mau Maus committed just as much atrocities as the British did in the Mau Mau Rebellion. And the British have historically been a key ally to the United States. And if Michelle Obama said, it's not about you, it's about the group, it wasn't about Obama when he was president. It was about the country. And here's what I am going to discuss with South Africa about the Boer War. Okay, the Boers were the Afrikaners, I should say, were put in concentration camps during the Boer War. They were put in concentration camps. There were over 27,000 Afrikaners died at the hands of the British and Lord Kitchener's brutality and Queen Victoria's brutality in that war. But then about less than 20 years after the Boer War, less than 20 years, 1914, 1915, well, even 1910, Jan Smuts was a big proponent who was a Boer War veteran that fought against the British. Jan Smuts agreed reconciliation with the British. He agreed to let bygones be bygones, and in 1910, the Union of South Africa was formed. It was. The Union of South Africa was established. And it was established where South Africa could be its own independent country, but still remain in the British Commonwealth of Nations. Well, World War I came about 4 years later, and there was an Afrikaner rebellion in 1914 and 1915. Grace Kiddo says hi. Hey, Grace, how are you? Nice seeing you. Well, in 1914 and 1915, there was an Afrikaner rebellion because some Afrikaners weren't over the Boer War, and they thought that South Africa should have allied with Germany. But the majority of Afrikaners didn't feel that way, and they enlisted in the South African military and fought against Germany in World War I. Well, the Afrikaner rebellion was suppressed, and German Southwest Africa, was taken from the Germans and made part of South Africa. And nowadays, it's present-day Namibia. Namibia became a country in 1990, as you guys know. Well, there was reconciliation and stuff 10 to 12 years after the Boer War happened. And really, it was more 8 years because the Boer War ended in 1902. The Union of South Africa was formed in 1910. Then, in 1914, which is just 12 years later, the South Africa allied with the UK in World War I. They did so again years later in World War II as well. And if Jan Smuts, he was arrested and put in a concentration camp. So he survived the war. If Afrikaners can forgive the UK for all that they went through, which they basically did, then Meghan Markle can forgive the UK and the royal family and reconcile with them over a few inappropriate, and I don't think it was intentionally racist, that's my personal opinion, but for a few inappropriate remarks and a few socially awkward questions, if you want to call it that, Meghan Markle can sure as heck forgive the UK for that. Okay? It's just asinine, and it's asinine that 17 million people watched the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle interview with Oprah Winfrey. I personally think a lot of that interview was staged, and I wonder if the Obamas are in cahoots with Meghan Markle. I don't know if they are. I don't have proof of it. It's just very, very suspicious to me that the Obamas got a bunch of deals with Netflix, and then shortly after that, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry got a bunch of deals with Netflix as well. And the British press can be brutal, but they're brutal with everybody. Kate Middleton was called Wadey Katie before she married Prince William. That part of the Meghan Markle interview was left out, but then somehow it made its way to YouTube. But Meghan Markle then said making fun of somebody's weight and racism is not the same thing. I mean, to a certain extent, I can agree with that. But at the same time, you know, it still hurt Kate Middleton's feelings that she was called Wadey Katie. You know, but she bit her tongue, and, you know, she's still married to Prince William. So, that's just, like I said, and that's what I did discuss with South Africa, that if the Afrikaners can forgive the British for all they did, then Meghan Markle can forgive the royal family for what happened, what transpired. And that's just like I said, it's a silly situation, and at the same time, it's a very shitty situation on top of that. And if you guys have any opinions or any comments or any questions, feel free to type in the chat, and I'll be happy, like I said, I will be happy to answer them. What little on the news other than those things that I have been able to follow, I mean, like I said, me being able to follow the news, getting prepared for the move has just been priority. I've not been able to check out the news as much as I would have liked the last week, I should say. Well, okay. Well, now here's the other thing. President Biden did trip on the steps in Air Force One, and look, I mean, I'm ADD and I can be clumsy at times. I could see myself doing that. But as I've talked about, it's looking like the rumors that President Biden has only been working 2.5-hour days because of 2.5-hour days because he's just so old and he's not allowed to function at function. What could have made Meghan do to avoid the spotlight and all eyes on her? The only thing Meghan could have done was to stay in the palace. I mean, if you are a member of a British royal family, you are going to have paparazzis follow you. You saw what happened to Princess Diana, and that was just a disgrace. What happened to her? The paparazzis just wouldn't leave her alone. But if you're a member of the British royal family, and they tell you this, you're going to have the press on. You're going to have the press follow you everywhere you go, and they're going to be taking pictures. And you got to have the perfect clothes on. Typically, you got to have the perfect smile. I mean, that's just part of being a member of the British royal family. But you are making millions of dollars a year at taxpayers' expense. And you have a free palace to live, so I don't think it's a bad trade-off, number one. But Meghan Markle thought differently, but it's protocol if you're a member of the British royal family, either by blood or marriage, to be politically neutral, particularly in UK and US affairs. That is the policy. And you have to have a relationship with every UK Prime Minister, every current UK Prime Minister, and every US President. That is policy, and I think it extends to Canada as well, because Canada, how basically Canada was formed, a lot of Canadians of British descent are British loyalists, which were Americans who were loyal to Britain during the American Revolution. And after the war, many of them felt like it wasn't safe for them to stay in the U.S. So a lot of them, if they couldn't go back to England, they went back to Canada. So Canada's not a British colony, but I do believe Canada is in the British Commonwealth of Nations. So I think it applies to Canadian prime ministers as well, that they have to have a relationship with every single Canadian prime minister, rather if they like that Canadian prime minister or not. And the British public doesn't mind the royal family. I'm not European. I don't understand royalty. That's one of the many reasons my country, the U.S., broke away with the U.K. and formed its own country. We still have a close relationship with them, but one of many reasons we couldn't be one country is because by the time we'd gotten over there, we kind of became anti-royalty to a certain extent. But 80% of the British public want the royal family there. And they don't mind paying the taxes to fund the royal family. The royal family has about 80% popularity over the UK. Now, there are a group of Britons, Labour Party Member of Parliament Jeremy Corbyn was one of them. He said he would want to make the UK a republic and not a constitutional monarchy, but he also said because of the royal family's tremendous popularity, he doesn't believe he could do that. So the British public don't mind doing all that. So if they want the royal family to stay, then the royal family needs to stay. I mean, I'm not British, I'm American. Now, do I think the British are our brothers in arms? Yeah. But I'm not British, I'm American. And then if us Americans can forgive the UK, after the American Revolution, it wasn't all pretty. There were some Americans that felt like the American government deceived them and they didn't receive the promises that they felt they would have after the War of Independence. So a lot of them fled to Canada to try to get free land. The British capitalized on the disgruntled American colonists and offered a lot of them free land up in Canada. And so in the War of 1812, the U.S. fought the UK, but then they also fought Canada as well. And Canada repelled an American invasion at Fort York. Now, the Americans were in the right in that war. This is not a War of 1812 live stream, but the British invaded Washington, D.C. in that war, and they burned down the White House. Dolly Madison, who was the wife of the president of the U.S. at the time, James Madison, salvaged a lot of key White House artifacts. That's why she's considered one of the greatest first ladies the United States has ever had. Well, the British burned down our White House in 1814. The war lasted from 1812 to 1814. British burned down our White House. And we can forgive the British for burning down our White House. Meghan Markle can forgive the UK for any traumatic experiences she had over there. That's what I firmly believe. I mean, the only way Meghan Markle could have avoided all this was to stay in the palace and defy Queen Elizabeth's orders to go out in public. But that could have came with consequences. Prince Harry could have been forced to say, you either are going to be expelled from the royal family or you're going to, or you got to divorce her. That could have happened. But what I will say is this, and this is where it's whiny. Okay, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle still wanted to be on the British government's payroll and make what a British prince and princess would make, but they fled the country, number one. Number two, they detached themselves from the royal family. You cannot still stay on the payroll, but you leave the country and you detach yourself from any royal duties that the royal family is expected to perform. That is just asinine to even think something like that. And on top of that, Meghan Markle does not have a relationship with her father. Her father, she's estranged from her father. She's estranged from most of her half-siblings. Roy Hay says you have to toe the line in those families or those situations. Yes, particularly if you're with the British royal family. And I'm American. I don't understand the whole royalty concept either, but I'm American. I'm not European. A lot of Europe, and not just England, but in a lot of Europe, there's a lot of obsessions with royalty. Clinton Thomas says, hi, Brett. Hey, Clinton. How are you? So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of obsessions with royalty. But if you're not willing to perform your royal duties like the protocol says, then you shouldn't be on the payroll. And Harry's sitting there crying, saying, all I have is my mother's inheritance. That's $15 or $16 million. And like I said, if you just live on the interest year, that's about $640,000 a year. I don't think you need a GoFundMe page if you're doing that. And then second of all, if you're so broke, you should not go live in a $16.9 million estate in the state of California. The state of California has one of the highest cost of living in the entire United States. So it's just, like I said, it was just asinine with this whole thing. Meghan Markle is not a Martin Luther King. She's not a Malcolm X. She's not a Rosa Parks. She's not a civil rights icon that paved the way for racial equality in this country. I mean, she's just not. I will say this, on Namibia, SWAPO needs to go. Namibia is going to keep going downhill until SWAPO gets unelected. And I'm going to explain this. Hage Geingob is going with the AstraZeneca vaccine, despite being on the border with South Africa. The South African strain is only the AstraZeneca vaccine is only about 10 to 15% effective against the South Africa strain. GoFundMe sounds like, come on, absurd me in this case. Yeah, I mean, in this case, it was very absurd. I mean, it was very absurd. Now, I do have a story where GoFundMe was necessary. It had nothing to do with me. I've helped people on it, but I've never been on it. Asian Boss is a YouTube channel, and they go around various Asian countries and cities in Asia, and they ask Asians what they think about certain issues. And their goal to do that was to try to bring the Asia and the West together. And I'm a subscriber to the channel, but the reason they had to go to GoFundMe is because even though they were very popular, they weren't making any money because YouTube demonetized a lot of their stuff. Well, so they had to get on GoFundMe to survive, and they raised the necessary capital just in about like 3 to 4 days to be able to survive. Haven't taken the vaccine, nor will I. Well, you know what, Roy? You said that. I took the vaccine, but like I said, it was a calculated decision for me. I was not forced to do it. It was a calculated decision. I chose to do it. I believe it is necessary. The vaccine provides me 95% immunity to the original COVID-19 strain, and it provides me 70 to 80% immunity against the South African strain. Mississippi did have a mandatory mask mandate if you went out on the town, but I can tell you from being out on the town, I always wore a mask, but I saw people who didn't. It wasn't enforced. Well, recently our governor, Tate Reeves, had lifted the mask mandate, but it hasn't been good for the state. I mean, Texas did as well, but COVID-19 cases are going up. And we had over 329 cases of the COVID-19 on Wednesday. Been so busy I didn't check the Thursday or the Friday cases. I still wear a mask. I still social distance. Now, I do go to outdoor sporting events nowadays. I also go to movie theaters now, but typically I go at an odd hour when nobody's there. But when I go to the movie theater, I eat drive-through food before I go, and I keep my mask on. I believe a lot of that, to be honest with you, is just being a good citizen. Now, you think differently about, all right, two things. Okay, I don't think there should be forced vaccines on people who don't want to take it in your own country. Now, if you want to go to somebody else's country and they want to make sure you get the COVID vaccine, then I believe it's that country's right to do so. I really do. And so that's my personal opinion. But if you South Africans don't feel safe taking the vaccine, then the ANC government should not force the vaccine upon you. That is what I firmly believe. Now, I did a video, we'll talk about South Africa in a minute. I did a video on the fees must fall movement. Okay, the fees must fall movement is just comical in a lot of ways, but it causes a lot of damage. Well, first of all, Fees Must Fall members started bringing signs up there calling one settler, one bullet. Well, there were white South Africans as well that thought they were entitled to a free or a discounted education. Well, they basically ran a lot of the white members off. number one. So it's become a racist movement. Number two, they damage a lot of property. This is not a it shouldn't be forced but encouraged. I agree. I agree. So it's becoming like it's not a peaceful protest anymore. I mean, they're not peaceful protests, they're violent protests. And the South African government right now this is largely due to ANC's mismanagement of money, but the South African government at the moment right now is broke. They cannot afford free university education for all South African students that so desire one at the moment. Also, a 30% pass rate to get somebody into university, or for somebody to graduate high school as well, is asinine. And then right now there's a lot of people that are going to university that shouldn't, and they're flunking out of university. Also, a lot of South African universities, and Chris White touched on this on his video, South African universities are being owed 1 billion rand total. Wits University says a lot of students there owe them 1 billion rand total because a lot of students aren't paying their student loans, they're not paying their tuition, and they're defaulting on loans. And that is just asinine. I think there needs to be state grants for economically disadvantaged people. But if you get the state grants, you ought to be able to do the work at the university, you ought to be able to pass the classes, and you ought to be able to graduate with decent grades if you get a state grant. But the ANC government is so corrupt and broke right now, and the South Africa rand currency is in junk status at the moment. The South African government just cannot afford to give everybody a college education that so desires one. And in the South African Constitution, primary school educations are right in the Constitution, secondary school educations are right in the Constitution, but in the Constitution, university education is not considered a right. I mean, that's just plain and simple. Now, I'm going to talk about Tanzania for a minute, and as far as I know, Tanzania and South Africa have a pretty strong relationship. Well, recently, Tanzania, they now have Africa's second female president. The first female president was a lady named Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who became the president of Liberia years ago, and she's still pretty popular in Liberia, and she had served 2 terms, and I believe she was a good president. Well, the new president of Tanzania is Samia Suluhu Hassan, and if I mispronounce the lady's name, I apologize in advance. Well, she's wearing a hijab. I do not have a problem that she's Muslim. Tanzania is a 30% Muslim nation. I don't think Islamic extremism is an issue in that country, and I wish her well. But what she doesn't need to do is she doesn't need to tote former President John Magufuli's line of denying the COVID-19. Let me tell you what COVID-19 denialism leads to. And the people of Tanzania found this out. John Magufuli had said that the COVID-19 didn't exist, that the whole COVID-19 thing was a hoax, that the COVID-19 was not real, that prayer by itself can cure the COVID-19. Look, I'm a Christian, but my God gives me common sense, and my God does not want me to be foolish either, okay? People were going in those mosques and in those churches to do that, which he encouraged them to do, by the way. And they were in groups not wearing masks. He denied the mask for a long time and mass shamed people. Well, COVID-19 cases kept increasing and increasing. Well, then also President Magufuli had stopped sending COVID-19 statistics to the WHO, to the World Health Organization. And the statistics have not been updated for about a year. Well, finally, Magufuli, after 8 to 10 months, admitted that Tanzania had a COVID-19 problem. But he also but COVAX offered to give Tanzania, and President Magufuli, those vaccines for free, at little to no cost. And President Magufuli refused those vaccines outright. Wouldn't get for him, his family, nobody. Okay? Now he's dead. And the opposition believes he died of COVID-19. I firmly believe he did too. His own party's saying he died of heart failure and he had been battling a heart disease for about 10 years. I don't believe that. And I'm going to tell you why I don't believe that. Because when he had disappeared for about 2 weeks. Nobody knew where he was. And anybody who was on the internet that suggested that that President Magufuli was sick or that he was hospitalized, and they posted on social media in Tanzania, they got arrested. They were arrested, they were put in jail, and they were detained without a lawyer. They were put in jail without due process of the law. Well, that's what happened. And then now it's shown that he's dead. And opposition figures have smuggled camera footage out of Tanzania. And these are people, they're showing government officials burying patients from the hospital at nighttime when they don't think there's any cameras there. There are a lot of Tanzanians who believe that they lost a loved one due to COVID-19, but the Tanzanian authorities under President Magufuli were telling them differently. That's what COVID-19 denialism gets you. And I'm also going to tell you this story in my home state. There was this lady, and she kind of helped organize my mother's funeral back in August. Well, her husband is a cop. Her husband's a cop in the same town where my mom's funeral was. Her husband's a cop, and her husband's kind of rigid, built, dedicated guy, good guy, but very opinionated, always thinks he's right. He thought the COVID-19 thing was a hoax. He thought he didn't need a mask. He thought media was exaggerating. He caught such a severe case of the COVID, he almost died. Now, praise God, he lived through it. And he's okay. He's back to work now. This is also the same guy who hardly admits that he's wrong. But he tells the whole town now, he says, I was bad wrong about this situation. This COVID-19 is real, and I messed up. Yep. So I believe this is a real situation that we're dealing with. I like germ warfare as a person. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a good guy. YouTube's gone after him. That's why he doesn't have a lot of his stuff on YouTube anymore. I think that's wrong. But I firmly believe germ warfare is 110% wrong in regards to this COVID-19 crisis. I really do. That's my personal opinion, and I can say it. I firmly believe that he is 100% wrong in terms of this. I mean, I really do. So, so that's that. All right. Okay. See which other I'm gonna see which other countries that I need to cover. But yeah, and then right now, I mean that's just what's going on right now in terms of the COVID, and I believe COVID-19 denialism, to be honest with you, is extremely deadly. COVID-19 denialism is just extremely deadly. All right. Here's what's going on in the DRC, and the UN Human Rights Commission has just posted this, and the DRC has been a mess for a long time. And right now, it says here, armed attacks kill hundreds, displace 40,000 civilians in the Northeast Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's a summary of what was said by the UN Human Rights Commission spokesperson Babar Balak, to whom quoted text may be attributed at today's press briefing at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. Okay, the UN Human Rights Commission, the UN Refugee Agency, is warning about an alarming increase in the number of attacks by armed groups on civilians in the northeastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is why the U.S. State Department listed this group as terrorists. They're called Allied Democratic Forces, the ADF, but they're anything but democratic. This group is very brutal. This group is not pro-human rights in any ways, is what it says here. Since January, attacks blamed on the armed group Allied Democratic Forces have killed nearly 200 people, injured dozens of others, and displaced an estimated 40,000 people in DRC's Beni territory and North Kivu province, as well as nearby villages in Ituri province. In less than 3 months, the ADF has allegedly raided 25 villages, set fire to dozens of houses, and kidnapped over 70 people. This is in addition to the 465 Congolese killed in attacks attributed to the ADF during the year 2020. Attacks and widespread human rights violations also continue in other parts of the North Kivu province. The main reasons for these attacks reported include retaliation by armed groups against military operation, their search for food and medicine, and accusations against communities of sharing information on ADF positions. First of all, I think Chris Wright's right on this, that that the Democratic Republic of Congo needs to be broken up. Aim to be me says, hello, Brett. Well, hello, Aim to be me. How are you? And if you guys have not subscribed to Aim to be me's YouTube channel, I highly recommend that you guys do it. Subscribe to her channel. And I think she has over 100 subscribers, and she does a lot of call-in streams. She did one a few days ago, and it was very, very interesting. And I firmly believe that you guys should subscribe to Aim to be me's YouTube channel. I've done a video encouraging people to subscribe to that channel. Also, subscribe to Rebellious Roost channel as well. But yeah, first of all, the Katanga region, which is in the Southern Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Nations should have let the Katanga region break apart from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And so thank you, well, you're welcome. But because here's the thing, okay, the Katanga region has its own culture, its own way of doing things that's very, very different than the rest of the DRC. Well, the UN, for months and years of being anti-Lumumba, anti-Patrice Lumumba, they decided to switch roles and side with Patrice Lumumba after he was assassinated by generals and to knock back the Katanga rebels. Well, the UN messed that up, and they sent Irish soldiers down there to quell the Katanga rebellion. And the Irish soldiers held on their position as long as they could, and they didn't have one casualty. Well, the Katanga rebels had over 1,000 casualties. They may have had 3,000 casualties. Now, one positive thing I will say about Netflix, The Siege of Jadotville is a really good movie, and it shows the Irish soldiers' heroic stance towards against the Katanga rebels. It wasn't their fault. They were just following orders and protocol from the UN. But when the whole situation got messed up and the Irish soldiers' position was overrun and they had to surrender, they were prisoners of war for 4 to 6 weeks, and they were given the blame. And many of Ireland made fun of them. They were called the Jadotville Jacks. But not until in the 2000s was the record given that the UN messed up, that Irish politicians messed up, that the soldiers fought brave and they fought gallantly, and eventually they were awarded medals. So it was a messed up situation, but it had nothing to do with the Irish soldiers. They fought bravely and they fought very gallantly. What it had to do with was the UN's ineptness in handling that situation. So the Katanga region needs to break away from the DRC, if you ask me. It's too big of a country with too many waterfalls. It's a beautiful river, but a lot of the rivers have waterfalls where you can't move a lot of capital down the river like you can in the Mississippi River. And it's just too big of a country to govern, that the country needs to be broken up in 2 to 3 sections, if you ask me. I just think it's too big of a country for anybody to try to govern. That's my personal opinion on the entire situation. Just too big of a country with what is going on right there. So that's what needs to happen. If you guys have not seen the film Siege of Jadotville, I highly recommend that you guys do check out the Siege of Jadotville. It's an excellent movie, and it's very historically accurate. I mean, you know, there's a lot of negative things about Netflix, but that is a very, very positive thing about Netflix, and they showed the accuracy of the movie. Now, latest news out of Liberia, and before we touch on Liberia, we'll touch on Burundi right now. The UN Human Rights Commission has been on Burundi for years to improve their human rights conditions. And the current president of Burundi, Evariste Ndayishimiye, has not really improved the situation. It is very, very similar to Burundi's previous president. And they've not done anything to improve the situation. There were actually Burundian refugees in Tanzania. Well, the Tanzanian government under Magufuli had cooperated with the Burundian government and arrested a lot of those refugees and deported them back to Burundi. Well, a lot of these refugees have also, they've been tortured in prison. They've been denied access to their lawyers. They've been given limited food, and it's a catastrophe. The UN Human Rights Commission is encouraging countries that have Burundian refugees at the moment not to deport them back to Burundi, particularly if they've not committed a heinous or a serious crime. Because a lot of these refugees have fled to escape Evariste in Daesh tyranny, but a lot of them have not been able to do that. Because they'll go to Tanzania, but then the Tanzanian government under Magufuli will arrest them and deport them back. What President Hassan, the new president of Tanzania, needs to do in this situation is that President Hassan needs to give political asylum to the Burundian refugees for the time being. I doubt she'll do it, but I hope she will. And I wish President Hassan all the best. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was a great president for Liberia. Hopefully President Hassan can follow in the footsteps of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and do a lot of good things as Africa's second female president. So, like I said, I wish President Hassan all the best in that situation. I wish her all the best, and I hope she does become a good president. I really do. Now, what it says here, and George Weah has had human rights issues. I think Liberia has been badly economically and politically mismanaged by George Weah, or George Weah, however you want to pronounce it. George Weah was a former soccer star in Liberia, and Liberia's most popular sport by far is soccer. And he was at one point FIBA Player of the Year. Well, because of his soccer stardom was a big reason why he was elected president. And here we go. It says Liberia's Justice Minister, and this is according to humanrightswatch.org, Liberia's Justice Minister, Frank Musa, gave a misleading statement at the United Nations Human Rights Council on March 17th regarding the government's purported efforts to ensure much-needed justice for widespread atrocity crimes committed during the country's back-to-back civil wars between 1989 and 2003. Speaking during the adoption of the outcome of Liberia's Universal Periodic Review, Musa claimed that Liberia is engaged in national and regional consultations around accountability for serious crimes. The last such consultation we are aware of, however, took place in 2019. The Coalition of Liberian and International Non-Governmental Organizations, highlighting a statement on the UPR outcome, the government has been essentially silent since then, while activists and witnesses of alleged crimes have faced increased threats. Now, with that being said, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf followed the same model here, so I'm not going to pin it all on George Weah. I'm really not. And I'm going to explain what's going on here. Okay, a lot of these criminals, to be honest with you, were children, though. And a lot of them were given drugs, and they were having their family members held to them at gunpoint if they didn't commit these atrocities. And a lot of them were younger than the age of 14 or 15. So I can understand what the families are going through, but Ellen Johnson Sirleaf chose not to do this in the name of national unity. Now, if you have evidence of child rape and forcing child soldiers, and that person did that, I can understand them being held accountable, and rightfully so. But a lot of these alleged war criminals were children that were being given drugs, not knowing what they were doing, or if they knew what they were doing, their family was being held at gunpoint, or they were threatening to rape or kill family members if those atrocities weren't committed. That's what happened with a lot of rebel groups in Liberia. So the Liberian government is in a very, very delicate and difficult situation right now. If you guys want, I ask you guys what you guys think, go into the comments section right here. But I think the Liberian government's in a very, very difficult situation, and you got to look up what age was this person when he did this. Was he a child? Was he high? Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Hang on one second. That just fell out from the pedestal right there. So hang on one second. There you guys go. So that's what you got to ask yourself. And I'm not saying I condone what's going on. No, I don't condone what's going on. I didn't condone what was going on in the Liberian Civil War. I'm just glad it's over. But that's just the situation that the Liberian government finds itself in at the moment, to be honest with you. And that's just what that's what's transpired. All right. Now, here's the latest news out of Uganda with Yoweri Museveni. And like I said, I think Yoweri Museveni has done a good job running the country of Uganda, but he's been in power since I've been born. I was born in 1986. He's the only Ugandan president I've ever known in my lifetime, because it's time for him to step down. But now, he's done a good job economically. He's done a good job handling the AIDS crisis, but it says he's suing a newspaper over vaccination reports. Yoweri Museveni is not allowing freedom of speech, and right now there have been random opposition figures that are walking the streets of Uganda on the sidewalk. A car is pulling over, and the people are throwing these opposition figures in cars. That's why a key opposition activist has fled to Kenya. I've done videos on her before. But anyways, back to this. Okay, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni is suing a local media group for reporting a claim that he and his inner circle were vaccinated against COVID-19 weeks before the first dosage arrived in the country. Now, I'm not saying this happened or didn't happen. It wouldn't surprise me because Yoweri Museveni has kind of seen himself as superior, and he has a very, very bad authoritarian streak. Lawyers representing President Yoweri Museveni said they filed a case against the Daily Monitor after the independent newspaper carried a story first published by the Wall Street Journal with the title, "Members of President Yoweri Museveni's inner circle were offered vaccines from China state-owned drug maker Sinopharm." According to the Wall Street Journal investigation, the offer by the Chinese government was meant to promote their vaccines. Similar offers were also reported in Peru and the Philippines. The newspaper said in Peru, nearly 500 politically connected people, including then President Martin Vizcarra, were secretly given the vaccine, which was undergoing clinical trials. Don't approve of it one way or another, but it wouldn't surprise me because Yoweri Museveni, like I said, has a very, very bad authoritarian streak. And Bobby Wine in the election, I mean, I do think Museveni would have won anyway, but I still think there was election fraud. Bobby Wine's house was surrounded by Ugandan police and military forces as soon as he got back from the voting polls. I mean, that is suspicious. And a lot of hotels in Uganda were scared to house Bobby Wine as he went on the campaign trail because they were worried about getting arrested. The hotel owners were worried about getting arrested and shut down by the Museveni government themselves. And that is just a classic case of human rights abuse. It's a classic case of political of dictatorship. And Yoweri Museveni is nothing more than a dictator. Hasn't necessarily been a bad dictator in terms of economics and in terms of handling the AIDS crisis and in terms of being an ally to the U.S., but he has an authoritarian streak. He's been in power for 35 years. It's time for him to go. It's time for him to step down. It's time for him to step down, plain and simple. Time for him to step down. All right, what I am going to say is, okay, people talk about how there have been pro-gun control marches as well in the U.S. here and there lately, but and some people, a handful of people are blaming the shooting in Atlanta on gun control. I'm saying that gun control is not responsible and gun control does not work. And I'm not talking about South Africa. You guys are South African. You know the situation in South Africa. South Africa is one of the most difficult countries in the world to own a gun. And South Africa has one of the highest crime rates, if not the highest crime rate in the world. The murder rate in South Africa is 7 times that of the United States. But not South Africa. Let's talk about Jamaica. Jamaica's murder rate is off the chart. Jamaica has the 3rd highest murder rate in the world. Jamaica has similar policies that are equal to South Africa in terms of owning or getting a gun. But that has not decreased the crime rate at all. If anything, when the gun control policies were implemented in Jamaica, Jamaica became a lot more dangerous of a place to be. And tourists don't feel safe when they go to Jamaica because, and they don't. That's why a lot of tourists have started visiting other islands. I've seen pictures of Jamaica, but I'm not going to go over there. I mean, it's a beautiful island, and there's a lot about Jamaica's history and culture that I like, but it's dangerous. It's a beautiful place, but it's dangerous. But then you look at Switzerland. We'll talk about Switzerland for a minute. In Switzerland, every male in Switzerland is required to own a firearm in Switzerland. They're required to own a gun. And you undergo firearm training at the range once or twice a year, and you requalify your gun. And Switzerland is one of the safest countries in the world. And yes, in Japan and South Korea, they have very, very low crime, but the gun control is off the chart in Japan and South Korea. That's their right. But in Switzerland, is lower. Actually, the crime rate in Switzerland is lower than those two places. And everybody in Switzerland is required to own a firearm. If they're not required, or they can own a firearm, but more or less they're required to own a firearm, and you undergo training at the range about once or twice a year. So, I'm going to end that right there. Thank you guys very much. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, I mean, there's a few people blaming it on gun control. I know I've said those things before, but that's kind of what's going on in the United States. And I wanted to talk about the Meghan Markle situation. I wanted to also talk about the Atlanta shootings and the anti-Asian hate crimes, because those are the things that are going on in the United States at the moment. Then talk about John Magufuli, former president of Tanzania, and talk about his passing, and talk about what I firmly believe COVID-19 denialism leads to. So, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless.